we'll kick off right now. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this afternoon's event. My name's Tony Gilbert. I'm here on behalf of New Era Technology. Look, we're going to get through this as best that we can this afternoon with hopefully giving you some bits of information, some updates and things that are going to be useful and pertinent for you. It is themed around safety and technology in schools. We've done talks in the past and they've been a little bit more broad about a lot of things going on, but this time we really wanted to hone down to some of the things that are really relevant when it comes to safety specifically, relevant and technology innovations and initiatives within school, which is why we have our partners here today alongside the Ministry of Education and Netsafe, who is an absolute pleasure to be here. A few administration things just before we kick off. The toilets are down here. If you need them, if the lights and stuff start going off and there's lots of sound, I'd really suggest that you probably get out of the room, which is a great idea. And look, I do need to acknowledge some people that are here today. First of all, the New Era staff, if you could please put your hands up. There's lots of them here today. Lots of people you can pick on as well if you really want to. That's Greg, our CEO. We've got Judy and Sandip and, guys, my eyes, and Michael and Ian and another Michael. So many Michaels at New Era. Sam, the wonderful Megan there. Who else have I got down there? I've got, and the team down, Devanch, and I'm not losing sight completely as well. Scotty's over there as well. I do want to acknowledge Danielle, who's here from the ministry. I can't say her last name, but I will get there eventually. Who had her birthday yesterday, but has still managed to get here. And Sean, who is here from Netsafe, who's sitting up the back there. Look, these events wouldn't be possible without some partners of ours. We've got Jordan, who is from Vicata over there. He's got his hand up now. Vicata and Stuart from Focus. Vicata is an incredible monitoring and security camera software bits piece, so they're supporting this event along with 2N and Edward Sound Lighting and Audio Visual. It allows us to be able to do these kinds of things. But we're going to kick off and get on with things. I'm going to talk today about some things ranging from quite annoying through to out and out dangerous. Now, for my sins and my background, I was a deputy principal just down the road at the wonderful Green Bay High School actually. And I certainly came across some of these things in my career, and you will have experienced them in one form or another, possibly in yours as well. And I'm going to focus on physical security and safety because there are some things that the team at Netsafe and the Ministry of Education are going to touch on in more depth than I am. And it's going to focus a little bit on how this modern technology can actually help keep staff and students safe. And it's really changed quite a lot in a short space of time. And I'm going to look at camera systems, environmental monitoring, and paging and integration with VoIP or phone systems. And hopefully there's some things in here that you're like, I really didn't know that that even existed. But first, I just have to say this. If you were going to take a photo of anything and just to check anything around security, I know this isn't specifically around physical security, and I know Danielle and I know Sean will touch on some of this stuff as well. These are things that are just must-haves, and I say them at every single talk I go to because they are just so unbelievably critically important to keeping you and your network safe. And I won't go over all of these. You will have the slide deck that's available for you at the end of all this, but really, really, really important things. But I'm going to get on with this stuff. All of this stuff will be quite familiar to you. Vaping, physical alterations, vandalism, trespass, it's all that great stuff about teaching and learning, but not really, that distracts you from what it is that you're doing. But ultimately, we need to think about these things because it relies upon keeping staff and students safe. Some of the barriers of the past we've had around this is those camera systems and video systems that have existed have needed big whirling servers. They've had tons and tons of hours of footage, and trying to actually get the information out of them is really, really difficult. It can be quite grainy and can be a bit funny, and you're kind of dependent on how things are going. It can also be quite difficult to share. You're sitting around in a server room with a screen hoping that they're going through the camera, and it just becomes difficult. And it actually chews up a lot of people's time. And one of the themes I do talk about in this is that your time is incredibly valuable. And certainly moving from being in education through into that commercial environment, it's something I've very much noticed is that sometimes people who work in schools, they don't really value their time in the same way that other people do. But it is very, very valuable. You are very, very time poor in what you do. And so it is very important that we're using smarts in order to take away some of that pain. Things in the past too, it needed to be separate cabling. That was very reactively based. You know, something would happen, so you'd go and get the information afterwards. The footage quality varied massively, and it was quite linear in what it could kind of record. It was sound and video in one kind of direction. And it was quite complicated. You know, there were lots of bits going on and plugging into bits and then a recorder and all this kind of stuff, and you had to go to a local monitor or a PC to kind of see this stuff. Now, you'll see with the advent of technologies that things are actually evolutionized enough. Now, hopefully your drives and the information that you even have at school can be accessed via cloud and cloud platforms and those sorts of things. The same now is evolved around physical security. So it now is very, very accessible, and high-end is accessible to schools, not just to massive enterprise levels. And this applies not only to cameras, but environmental monitoring and things like VoIP systems that integrate. Key features of them. You don't have to rely upon, like servers are now moving off-site, you don't have to rely upon that. Better retention and quality, utilising the cloud. The cloud's massive. You know, the storage and capability of it is huge. Scalability, you don't have to put the whole thing in at once. You can kind of start and build out. Even with a VoIP system, you can start with some areas and build that system out as you identify and understand your needs. And you can access the best quality stuff. It's not just there and available for organisations that have, you know, have massive, massive amounts of money. This stuff is as good as anywhere else and is now available to schools. I do want to acknowledge N4L in this. That part of that Te Mana Te Honu program where you've got the network refresh, this is making a lot of this completely accessible. Your high-speed internet connection, your switching, your cabling in the back end, your wireless APs, those sorts of things are actually allowing you to have access to this technology that otherwise might be inhibitive. But the biggest thing of all is smarts. This is the stuff that I want to be really clear about, is the big difference between what you thought these systems might be like and what they are now. And I want to touch on a few just to give you a bit of a taster. The first one is, as I said, it used to just be footage that was sitting here. Now you can actually identify people not only upon things like, what's the colour of the top they're wearing? They are wearing a red top, search all footage. Are they wearing it up the top? Are they wearing it up the bottom? What does their face look like? I can take in a picture now and I can search the database and look for somebody's face. And the amazing thing about that is not only searching after something's happened, if that becomes a problem, then I can tag them as a person of interest so that next time they come on site and the camera detects them, X person, group of people can get an alert around it. Now that's accessible now. I just kind of blew me away. They're actually really nice people, by the way. Same with license plates. I was all CSI on this, right? So, oh, well, you know, license plate detection. And you're all starting to now be ticking in your head going, well, how does this apply for me in school? And we will look at a few scenarios really quickly. But this is the kind of stuff, not only just license plates, you can identify by the type of vehicle. It's a truck. I want you to identify a truck, and it can send an alert to what it is. I don't know why you'd want to identify a truck in a school, but you might. Might be because I was looking at buying that. That's pretty cool. But it does across multiple locations as well. It's not just looking at one camera and one camera's footage. The smarts in the end will look at all of it, and will look upon a date range and a time as required. You can analyse things. You can analyse, as I said, across multiple locations, multiple time periods, and you can archive and get information that has been used in the past. So you can actually access stuff back to a certain amount of time for however long you want to keep it, which we know is getting more and more important, unfortunately, in some of the things happening in schools. We all know the advent of vaping in schools. I remember, Dave's here from Green Bay, and the good old days of going back and smoking in the toilets and debok and all that stuff. But I think he stopped smoking now, which is great, Dave. Only cigarettes, that's great. But we know what the vaping is like. It's becoming a thing. And we certainly know that even via some of the Ministry of Education's initiatives, air quality is becoming important. I mean, there's been a little bit of a virus around lately, I've heard. So this stuff is way smarter than just a smoke alarm, or something like that. This can actually detect, not only that, it can detect sound. For instance, you can say, if there is a sustained sound above this decibel level for longer than 10 seconds, send these people an alert. For instance, assembly's on, the toilets are down the other end of the school, whatever else is going on. So you have control to be able to help this artificial intelligence get smart about what it is that you want it to do. It can also detect motion where you don't think their motion should be, particularly useful possibly outside of school hours as well. And audio. Now, audio can be a little bit contentious because by default, generally, it's turned off because of privacy things. But if required, you can, from a console, whether that be, excitingly, your phone, a tablet, a computer, at home, because you have an admin access, you can enable those features and analyze things from anywhere, rather than have to go to a place to do it. Yeah. And it detects things I don't really understand. Probably that's because I'm from Dunedin. I don't really understand it being warm. Things like temperature, but I'm assuming it's talking about fire, relative humidity, and air quality, which is becoming an issue in some places. So very, very smart things that'll do stuff for you. That alert, as I talked about, it can extend to numbers of people or numbers of vehicles and alerting to those people again. For instance, if you say after hours of school, if there are more than 3 cars that come in at once outside of sports, that come in at that time into that entrance, somebody gets an alert. And it's not about saturating it, it's about being able to be more proactive rather than reactive about what's going on. Again, talking about things like paging systems, this is the 2N system here. It's integrating those systems with other systems you've already got at the school. And the example I'll use here, and they do have tons and tons of features, is that you are utilising existing infrastructure. So you're using your switching and your cabling and those things that are already there. You can access it from multiple platforms. And the example here is that you can put in speaker systems externally and internally using your switches and things that are already there that have been supplied for you. So even if you haven't gone through the process, planning around having those ports and switches available is really important. But more importantly, for instance, this is an example of 3CX, which is a VoIP system alongside the paging system. Now this literally means that from a phone with the right people, they can dial a number, I think it's like a 3-digit number, and it automatically sets a lockdown into process through that paging system. So my point really here is when you're thinking about how these systems work and in terms of student safety, and not only that, about how the day-to-day admin works, you want to think about how they're working together and how they can work. For instance, one of the features around all of these sets is the ability to use your Active Directory or your groups of people within the back end of how your network is set up and have that populate those systems as well, rather than have to do it again or separately. Now, if you've got a smartphone, if you wouldn't mind just taking 10 seconds and scanning that QR code and see what happens. Yep, just with your camera, it should come up with a little link and you can just, I'll get out of the way so you don't take a picture of me, that would be weird. You don't do that. But hopefully you can pick on there, a little link should come up. And Jordan, who's here from Vicata, Jordan, where is that camera set up? California. In California. So that is a live link to California right there. So this is one oh, it's no longer valid. Oh, it might have turned off. So it'll be interesting to see if Jordan can make it live. He said it was going to be for 30 days. But the idea being that at any point you can create a QR code, a cell phone number, an email to any group or individuals that you have set up and share, whether it's a camera, whether it's a period of time, whether it's a certain amount of footage to be able to do things. It has time limitations, as I said, and things like blurring abilities. You can actually blur out other people's faces so that that doesn't become a privacy issue as well. But quickly, some scenarios that might be relevant for you. At one end of the scale, which is yeah, it's annoying in its safety, but it's not the be-all and end-all of everything. Great times, somebody smoking or in the toilets, down we go. What do we traditionally do? Run down, we might catch them, or we use our good old environmental monitor built in. Isn't it great? Fantastic. And we look for evidence, nothing like sticking on a pair of rubber gloves and fishing down in the toilet for the end of a bit of somebody's morning tea. Might get in, make an accusation of some kids, might get the parents in, and a lot of the stuff takes time. Getting smart about using the technology, for instance, obviously we don't want to have cameras in toilets, but to have an environmental monitor that can trigger things off, alert a person. Then in a key area, you can have a camera. We know who's gone in, who's gone out. It makes the argument a lot more compelling and also makes the deterrent a lot more compelling. And there's obviously the part of this too that is tied up with the message that goes to the community around what you're doing in terms of physical security. Scenario 2, cool, the kids are fighting in D block, yay! I mean, it always used to blow my mind as a DP. What do? Cool, we'll run down and break it up. or get into, and we know that there's issues with, getting involved in that stuff now. Raise your voice, break it up, all this kind of stuff going on, talk to people around, interview kids, get parents in. All of this stuff takes so much time and is so incredibly frustrating and may not get the result you want. So there's the antecedent side of this, which is to, try and deter it as much as possible. But kids will be kids at all ages. But there's also the part of being able to have real information there in real time and hopefully be able to get involved before it escalates to a point. So this is, again, having multiple things in multiple areas, being able to look and see what's happening, making sure that things are lined up, and being able to get that information quickly, not mucking around for hours and hours and hours trying to get through footage, trying to get through that information. And you can use zones as well. So you may have a part of the school where you actually want to, there's bushes waving in the background, but actually want to segment on a zone, and if there is movement in that zone, then you can get an alert around it. So very smart. Scenario 3, things burning down, fires, bits and pieces, gas leaks, had that before. Run down to the area again, use your built-in environmental monitor. It's actually not particularly safe to do that, but it's what we do sometimes. But the cool bit about this stuff is, of course, you can then instantly share this information with emergency services if required. And also you can have that footage that's available to find out how this thing might have happened in the first place. Again, monitoring here, we can see that there's index levels using all sorts of things here as well. Air quality index, you can see there's a temperature spike here, and you can set things at certain noise levels and parameters that are involved. Scenario 4, who hasn't had vandalism at the school, tagging. I still remember going through the clear files with the pictures of the tags and going through the kids' books and what was the tag and all that stuff. But again, it's incredibly frustrating. And you try and reach out to the community and create deterrence. But in reality now, you can actually scan in a school map. You can set up your things of where they are. It can set areas of where motion is happening. And those systems are all smart and tied in and able to be grown in order to provide you the information you need to make decisions. And the worst one, it's horrible. I suppose most of you have been through it one way or another as a real lockdown scenario. It's pretty unpleasant. Again, I'm sure the policies and things for schools have evolved a lot since my time, but I still remember running around the school trying to find out what was going on while all the classrooms were locked down. It was madness. What was I going to do? Stop it. Terrible. But you call for help. But in these kind of scenarios here, of course, you can share that information. You can silently lock things down. You can use those smarts to your advantage. And also allows you to be able to work out kind of what's going on and how it's going on. Almost finished. Key features, some of them there. I won't go through them all individually because I'm assuming most of you can read, which is cool. It's all about, I really like that AI that saves you time, that saves you valuable time for what you're doing. It is a proactive and also reactive to what's going on, because that is the reality of working in a school environment. But there are so many great features that are involved when you are considering how this stuff works. My final word, as someone who has been fortunate enough to work in schools and work in that technology space around this stuff, they can take the legwork out. They really can. It needs, all systems now, you need to be asking about the smarts they have and integrating with other systems. I really, really believe that. And they need to be easy for users to use. If you're going to have access to people like deans, business managers, they need to be able to, they're so time poor, they need to be able to know how to use it and use it easily. Again, sometimes educators don't realise the value of your time. Sitting there trolling through hours and hours of footage of that, I realise that there's something important there in front of you, but there is smart technology out there that can do that for you now. I just don't, cheap and cheerful. I've been in this quite some time. Buying cheap stuff gives you outcomes that you might not necessarily want, which is why I always say reverse engineer. Think about what the scenario is and what information you would need, and make sure that whatever it is that you are implementing and you are using is able to provide you that. Start backwards. Don't start with, oh, it's this much, because you're always going to get into a situation where you may not get the outcome that you required when you need it. And finally, what a great positive message for community. I've talked about obviously some of the safety features, but it's not a big leap for you to some of you to understand how these features can actually be used for positive messages in your community as well. Not only around safety, but we know that we have schools and communities that are having a camera or any kind of information up live. They can see the kids arriving for the day, sending that message, even live streaming things like assemblies, having those bits of information that are around. Hopefully, there's a couple of bits of interest in there that you haven't had before in terms of that safety stuff. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Danielle when I just pass off, who's waiting in the wings. I'm going to plug her computer in, so if you want to have a stretch for just 30 seconds while we set up her computer. But thank you for your time.
Welcome. Hi everyone for coming on this beautiful day. I'm here to kind of talk about the other side of things. That was a lot about the physical security. I'm here to talk about the digital security or cybersecurity in schools. So my name is Danielle van den Dungen. I'm from the Ministry of Education and the security team. I used to work at the Education Ministry a long time ago, 10 years ago, so it's kind of in my blood. My mum's been a teacher since forever and her grandma's been a teacher since forever. But I left and went to MB and started my career in cybersecurity and worked for a place called CERT New Zealand, which is kind of the government's cybersecurity team, which is where I met the excellent people like Netsafe and Infraero and a whole bunch of other people, and then came back to education. So what is cybersecurity? When you hear the word cybersecurity, you think of people all dressed in black in a back room looking at ones and zeros with matrix screen kind of raining down, but that's not what it's about at all. All it is about keeping your system secure, keeping the people out that you don't want to have access to your stuff and letting those who do want to have access to come in. So we need to remember who we're doing this for. These days, everything about a student, every single thing that you do is now online. If it's digital, if it's connected to a computer, and that computer is at any time connected to the internet, someone can access that. So when we're talking about physical safety, of course it's so important, but this is kids' digital identity. This is everything about them. Their mana is around them online just as much as it is in person, so we need to kind of protect that as well. So how bad is it? Last year, almost 9,000 incidents were reported to CERT New Zealand. I'm sure most of you have experienced some form of incident or heard of one, and I'm sure it was not reported to CERT. So we know that that's massively underreported in New Zealand. The education sector is increasingly going online, either remotely or just the way that we're working is now more and more online. And schools don't always have the technical know-how. I'm not talking about your IT provider or your IT lead, but I mean teachers, heads of departments, your school business managers. We don't have that kind of base level of cyber literacy that we're after. And of course, the attackers want data, any old data. No longer do they have to work out how to get in and then how to make money from it. But that market's so big these days that they can just steal a database of email addresses and passwords and sell that as it is. They can just sell the data. They don't have to work out what to do with it. So, if the problem is that big, what on earth is the ministry doing about it? Well, we recognise that it's a huge problem. Last year, the Waikato DHB went down. People couldn't record anything, they couldn't access their patient files. It was a big wake-up call. And they asked, hey, is this just as risky in schools, you know? And we said, yeah, actually, the education sector is just as at risk, if not more, than the health sector. So we've been working away. We've got some seed funding this year to work out what kinds of things could we do to help out. What problems can we kind of get around to make sure that we're kind of securing schools better, but not adding to that administrative burden of schools and not taking away any teaching and learning time. So we've signed up to a few initiatives. We've signed up to something called Safer Technology for Schools, which is where edutech vendors can go through a self-assessment that checks whether they meet basic technology standards, security standards, privacy standards, make sure that data is not being zoomed off overseas. And then they get a badge for doing that. So it's very new. here at the moment will be teaching and talking to edutech vendors, getting them to go through that process, but hopefully that will make choosing more software easier for schools. We're also developing a self-assessment audit, so you can kind of go in, answer a few easy questions and work out where you stack up against other schools in the area. Are there kind of areas that you could be improving? So I've come up with 10 tips that schools can do to do their half of the bargain. There are 3, I've grouped them up into 3 kind of chunks: prevent, detect and recover. Prevent. So the easiest way to not let your students' data go everywhere is to prevent people getting access to it in the first place. The 4 tips I have here are strengthen passwords, enforcing 2FA, limiting users' access, and auditing where you're at currently. I know what you're thinking: passwords, passwords, passwords. This has been the top thing people have been talking about for about 10 years, probably 20. But it's true, it is the #1 thing that people can be doing to protect their data, to protect their systems, to keep people out of the things that they've signed up to. So once upon a time, systems weren't very accessible. They didn't need to have so much security put onto them, and all we needed was just a username. Then it was just a username and a password. Then that password had to be a bit longer. Now, I'm sorry to say that it does have to be longer again. There are 2 golden rules that are for every account that you ever sign into, ever, in your personal life and in your work life. You need to make them long, longer than you think they need to be, and they need to be different. Every single account has to be different. So many different accounts. I know principals' accounts have been compromised because they've reused their password from somewhere else. That's hard. That's really hard to do. So I recommend you have a password manager. It's impossible to remember long, strong passwords for 50 different accounts. So a password manager is a digital vault that you can sign into. It's encrypted in a different way. It's locked down in a different way, so that it's much safer. And of course, it's much safer than whatever kind of method you've got to remember your 50 different passwords. The little extra tip for experts is something called single sign-on. Single sign-on is where you kind of connect, you pick one thing as your login identity, it might be Google, it might be Microsoft, and allow that to log in for you online. You might have seen that in your personal life somewhere. Sometimes you see a sign up to this with Facebook or sign up to this with Google, and that's that in action. So that is a bit more tricky. You probably need an IT provider to help you set that one up. But across your school, that will make you more secure because your staff, of course, won't be creating all these extra passwords. They'll just be reusing their one strong one that they do have. So 2FA is that second one. This is my personal favorite. If you do one thing, please go do this today. 2FA is short for two-factor authentication. Sometimes it's called two-step verification. And it's a second thing to access your account after a password. So I've also described it as another lock on the door. It means if you do lose your password or someone guesses it, it gets cracked or it gets stolen, there's something else that's a safety net preventing people from getting in. There are 3 kind of types. There's biometrics, which is your face or your fingerprint. It's often connected with Windows Hello. There's phone-based, which could be a text to your phone or a code generated on your phone, or a security key like this, that you just kind of pop into your USB slot, and then whenever you're logging in, you just need to touch it. And then you just need to hold on to this with your keys or with your lanyard and look after this. Personally, this has saved me multiple times. I have had requests for me to enter my 2FA about 3 times now where I knew it wasn't me. It's told me to log into my Facebook when I wasn't trying to log into my Facebook, and so that's when I knew somehow that password had been breached. I need to reset that. Someone else there has got it and they're trying to get in. If you put this in your school, across your staff, you will protect your data to no end. Microsoft and Google have done some research and they think it prevents 99% of attacks. 3, start at the very beginning. There's a ton of configuration in every single account. Most people just sign up with their default, set it to how they think it should be going and get going. But things change. I recommend you do an audit. I think New Era have got a great audit that you can sign up to that just checks, are your configuration settings correct? Is there something that's accidentally leaving a door open for people to come in? So an audit is a really good, and it's great to create a roadmap as well. So if you get about 10 things, don't feel overwhelmed. It means over 1 year, 2 years, you can sit there and come up with a roadmap of things to do. Less users, less access. This is what some people call the principle of least privilege. If someone does get access to an account and they have full admin access, obviously that's amazing. So the philosophy behind this is don't give access to people if they don't need it. An obvious one is students don't need access to staff files, so you kind of only give them student level of access. So it's about taking that philosophy and applying it to every account, right down to everything. You know, not all your staff need access to financial details, so you don't give access to them. It's just about making sure every account you have, there's a good OU group set up or a good different user groups set up to kind of lock down that access. If people need it for a short amount of time, you can give it to them temporarily and then take it away again. Detect. As Tony mentioned before, the faster you can work out something's going on, the faster you can fix it. And of course, minimize that damage. There's 3 points in here. It's about checking your settings regularly, setting up alerts, and knowing what you're looking for. So again, with that, those new features coming in, if someone has gone in and made some changes, one of the first things they might do is turn off that 2FA. That's the first thing I would do. Or create a new account and give it admin access. So going in there and double checking how that's going, setting up alerts, things like Google and Microsoft and other systems. If you go in, if a user does go in and turn something on or off or make a change, you can get an alert to a leader, school business manager, an IT manager, to let them know that something's gone on that they shouldn't. And my third is knowing what you're looking for. There's a lot of change going on. I recommend at least one person at the school is nominated as the IT lead. They, much like a privacy officer or a health and safety officer, there's a ton of training out there that we can do to support them. We've got some webinars online. And they are the one that will be receiving those alerts and knowing what's going on. And that's just repeating what I'm saying. If you know what to look for, you can make that detection. Even if you have a great IT provider, I do recommend you have someone who's responsible at the school. And recover. So it's impossible to keep everything safe. Things are going to be compromised at some point. So how do we get back on track? And these are my final 3 tips are making sure you have cyber insurance, having good backups, and planning how you'll respond and recover. Cyber insurance. If you are in the risk management scheme, you have it already. So cyber insurance is fantastic for recovery. They have, sorry, Tony's distracting me. And they have specialists who can come in when you've got an incident and help you out there. Even when you have a fantastic IT team behind you, they're going to be all hands to the pump. Getting rid of everything that's in there and rebuilding it again. So the cyber insurance can come in, do that forensic audit, work out how they got in, and make sure that's blocked so they can't get in again. Critical information is backups. If you do not have some form of good backups, or you're not using the cloud effectively, any file that is on your computer is gone. The best forensic team in the world is not going to recover that. There's so much great stuff that people are working on at home that is quickly saved to their desktop. If you can encourage your staff and your team to make sure that everything is saved to a shared drive, to the cloud, that it's backed up, save you a whole bunch of time. And make sure you do have an IT plan as well. We've got some tips online. Your computer might be down, for example. Have a plan for who's going to be leading and managing the response, coordinating with the ministry or privacy commissioner, your IT providers. and then who might still be running the school, because there's a lot of hats that are going on at the same time. It's a lot. That was a lot. I understand it was a lot. If you don't want to do all that, please, can you please focus on making sure every password is different and making sure you have 2FA. Those two things will save you from a world of hurt over and over again. My team would love to hear from you. We are investigating how we can help, what kinds of things will make a difference to schools. If you have a question, if you've got a concern, if you've got feedback, we would absolutely love to hear it. We've also got a newsletter with training that we've got coming out, events that we've got coming out, tips that we've got coming out. We send it out every 6 weeks or so. If there's anything major, we will send it in the Ed Bulletin, so if you're feeling email overwhelmed, just stick with the Ed Bulletin. But if you have an interest in IT, please subscribe. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know who, I'm Sean Lyons, I'm from Netsafe. You shouldn't know who I am. If you don't know who Netsafe are, we're an independent, non-profit, non-government organisation, and we're here to help. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's exactly what our job is. We're an online safety organisation, New Zealand's first, let's face it, New Zealand's only online safety organisation. That's how I can safely say that we're the first. And we provide support for everybody in New Zealand, all internet users in New Zealand, to keep themselves safe online. And we do that for about 30,000 people last year came to us for incident response, incident support. About 1,000 of those were schools directly, but the rest of them, you can pretty much guarantee were your children and your parents. I don't mean your children and your parents, but the children and parents of your school communities. We help an awful lot of people each year deal with online safety incidents and hopefully get them to a resolution that works for them. You can see I'm not checking the time, I'm not rushing, I am just flicking between slides. Just want to talk to you a little bit about the people that come to us and what's going on. People come to us generally, they feel like the internet is a scary place, filled with scary people. And that's not because the only people that use our service are people who think the internet is a bad place. It's because generally the last experience they had online is one that caused them some kind of harm. And our job is to try and get them not just to the point at which they aren't harmed, but also Netsafe's a pro-technology organisation and really does believe in the good value of technology. So part of our job is to make sure they get through that incident not scarred, not feeling like they can't use technology, but actually still understanding the value of technology, and that's the point I want to try and get across today. We're also very aware that people look at technology very differently, and that's a very different, the way in which your young people, your students look at technology is a very different way to the way that you look at technology, and that's a very different way to the way that your parents within your community look at technology. And we understand the problem that gives you when you're trying to deal with online safety incidents, with physical incidents of safety that might have a manifestation online. And that's part of our job too, to try and help support you through those situations. So what is it that we see? Stuff that I just want to talk about really briefly, the kind of things that we are seeing associated with schools, and just to check whether or not that resonates with yourselves. So increasingly, we are seeing reports from members of staff about harmful situations that they find themselves in through their job as a teacher that are coming to them either from students or from parents within their community. Unfortunately, we see a rising number of potentially harmful digital content created by the community aimed at teachers. It's something that we deal with more and more often. We're seeing increasing numbers of reports about or from younger children. So where we might have looked at it 4 or 5 years ago and expected to see a sort of peak of report between sort of 11 and 13, we're seeing that age beginning to trend down. And certainly at the extremes, we're seeing much younger reports about much younger children caught in situations online that are potentially harmful, or even, unfortunately, perpetrating potentially harmful situations online. We see increasing numbers of situations that start or end with the loss of control of social media accounts. So people being impersonated, people having social media accounts taken over. That's individuals, but also, unfortunately, increasingly, businesses, schools, other institutions having lost control of their own social media accounts. We, unfortunately, are seeing a steady increase in bullying and threats to physical harm online reported to us, along with an unfortunate increasing number of school fights filmed and then shared online. and an ever-increasing, unfortunately, report of the sharing, receiving, and accessing of intimate content online. So the sharing of nudes, or the use of nudes, or the threat of release of nudes to harm individuals. So one of the tools I want to talk to you about that assists us and you is a piece of legislation called the Harmful Digital Communications Act. Just a quick show of hands, how many people are familiar or are aware that such an act exists? Great. Okay, so just to give you a quick recap. So the Harmful Digital Communications Act has been in legislation since 2015. Netsafe is the statutory approved agency under the HDC, which means if you believe you have been harmed by content online, you can come to Netsafe to make a report of that. We can assist you in two ways. Either we can help you to try and deal with that situation, remove content or deal with it in some other way, or we can help you put the process together to take that potential harm through to the district court to try and get the sanctions that the district court can help you with to support those situations. So there's a couple of parts to the Act. Probably the most important part is that the Act has laid out 10 communications principles, 10 things that are, as of the beginning of the Act, no longer things that it's acceptable to do online, that a communication cannot be. I won't go through them all, but there are some really important ones in there. Probably the most important one, or the one with the greatest change to New Zealand legislation. That makes it sound very grand, but it is. This one here, the incitement or encouragement of an individual to commit suicide. Prior to the Harmful Digital Communications Act, somebody had to make an attempt on their own life after being incited to suicide before it became a breach of the law. Telling someone to kill themselves under HDC is a breach of the Act. It doesn't require an attempt. It doesn't require someone to do anything to harm themselves, but just the encouragement to commit suicide might be a breach, as well as breaches of confidence, as well as communications that are grossly offensive, threatening, intimidating. All of those are communications principles that, if breached, could put that communication and the person that made it in the road of an act of legislation. So there are a couple of parts to the Act, not just those communication principles. Firstly, the communication has to be targeted towards an individual. So it has to be about somebody. They don't necessarily need to be named, but it has to be identifiable as towards a person. You can't currently, under the legislation, have a Harmful Digital Communication Act towards a school, say, or against a religion or another group. It has to be about an individual. Now that individual could be, you could say the principal of a school. Now that's still an individual, that's someone who can be identified as, but you can't say an entire school or the science department or whatever somebody might say. It has to be about a named individual, has to breach one of those principles that I talked about, and it has to be something that causes harm to that individual. So we have a way to test, effectively. Harm is not objective, it's subjective. It's based on the harm that person experiences. So if somebody suffers serious emotional distress as a result of that communication, then it's harmful. If it's also a breach of the principle and it's also about that person, then that's a breach of the Act, and somebody could find themselves in a bit of hot water. Our job is not, though, Netsafe's job, not one of law enforcement. Our job is about negotiation, mediation, and persuasion. The majority of HDC reports that come to us from schools and from the general public don't make their way through to court, and that's actually how the Act was designed. The approved agency's job, our job, is to try and get a resolution to that situation before anybody finds themselves in front of the judicial system. Part of that was designed to make sure that this Act didn't criminalise young people. So a large part of our work where these situations exist between two young people is about a process of negotiation and mediation between the parties, or potentially a process of negotiation and mediation between the place where the content is in order to try and get the content removed. The majority of resolutions under the HDC through Netsafe result in the removal of content. People come to us generally when they've been harmed by that content, not because they're looking for revenge, not because they're looking to find somebody, but because they want the harm gone. And the quicker the harmful content is gone, the better the outcome is generally for individuals. So that's our job. It's worth noting at this point that there are some special roles for schools under HDC. One is that a school can be an online content host. So anything that a school hosts or posts, you can be considered as an online content host. So if you have control over the system, Now that might be a page on a social network, could be your own website, but anything could be an LMS, something that you have control over. If somebody complains about content, then you could be a content host. So think about systems that you have where people have the ability to post content. If it's potential, if you can post there, somebody can cause harm there. Make sure you understand what all of those systems are within your school, just in case somebody turns up one day and says, you've got 24 hours, you're an online content host, please remove X piece of content. The other special role that schools have under the Act is that you can make complaints under the Act on behalf of your students. So generally the report has to be done by an individual or by their parent. You're one of the very few groups as a school, so the principal or the principal's nominee can report harmful content that you see, even if the person who it's targeted at says, I don't want any bar of it, or I'm having nothing to do with it. You are able to act in their support and make that report to us under the HDC, and we can take action based on your report for one of your students. Part of the way that we do this is we have relationships with a large number of the online content platforms, the online content hosts that this content is kept on. The names and brands that you'll be familiar with, part of our job is to establish and maintain relationships for reporting with those platforms. So name a platform in New Zealand, you don't have to name it, but name a platform in New Zealand, the likelihood is we have a reporting relationship with them. We have a kind of hotline, if you will, to the places that moderate that content, and we can act in support of you to try and have content removed, even if you are suffering or struggling to get that content removed. Even if your families, your parents, your kids have already tried to report it and haven't done, there's a chance that we can assist you and try and cut through some of those those difficult situations that we know that people find themselves in. You find harmful content, you report it, the platform comes back and says no. You try again and they still say no. If you find yourselves in that position, please, I urge you, contact Netsafe, talk to us, and we can try and help negotiate you through that space. Where do you start? In terms of developing a safe online platform within your school, safe online environment, we've developed a self-audit tool. We have had one for a number of years. This is the most recent iteration. It's basically a series of questions that you can ask yourself to work out where you are in terms of your current online safety standpoint, online safety platform, work out where the gaps are, assess or build yourself some priorities, and then we can provide you some steps or some starting points to move yourself through those gaps, to build on those priorities and find yourself in a safer environment. And our team of education advisors can help you work through that directly. If all of this seems too much, we have created a quick reference guide for responding to incidents that occur within your school. It can be downloaded from the Netsafe educators website. Really is a step-by-step process of what it is you need to do at the point that you're aware that you have an online safety incident. Now, this is not the security incidents you've been hearing about. This is an online safety incident. When somebody reports something to you that is happening to them, through school, outside of school, related to school, this guide will step you through that process, give you an indication of what it is you need to do, other agencies that you might need to talk to, and over and above all of this, if you are unsure and find yourself in the middle of an incident, call us. That really is our job. We're funded by the Ministry of Education to do this job. I'm not standing up here being all altruistic and saying just ring me anytime. That's our job. That's our function. We can provide direct support and guidance around different parts of legislation, not just the Harmful Digital Communications Act. We also provide support and guidance around the Privacy Act and schools' obligations under that. Talk to us about those things too. Just a very quick point. A lot of questions we get are around the school's abilities to look at devices when they find themselves in these situations. Online safety incidents, somebody has sent an image of whatever to somebody else and somebody else is harmed by it. A lot of questions we get are around your ability to access private versus school-owned devices in order to seek evidence and try and get to the bottom of what it is that's going on. Just want to clear up a couple of those things from our perspective. First of all, a school-owned device, as a school, you can search any of those at any time in any way that you see fit. Privately owned devices, not quite the same. So things that you cannot do You cannot search a young person's device without their express permission, more likely their parents' express permission. You cannot access personal accounts that are not related to school. You cannot say, show me your Gmail account. You can't ask them for the password to unlock their device and then take their device and use that to search it. You can't ask young people to download or reveal items stored on another device. You can't ask them to go through their Facebook account to access somebody else's Facebook account that you know that they're connected to get hold of something from them. And you can't store evidence of what is essentially objectionable imagery on the school as part of evidence. If you are aware that young people are sending nudes between each other and somehow you find out that this has been sent from one device, you cannot and must not store that image. Sexualized images of young people are objectionable images, and the possession and distribution of those images is illegal. Can't store evidence of that. If you find or are aware that that stuff has happened, you need to contact law enforcement rather than trying to keep a body of evidence for that. You can put the school in a difficult position.
What happens if it's sent to you?
If it's sent to you, you need to delete it as quickly as possible. In theory, by the letter of the law, being in possession of it for any length of time is a breach of the law. You're in possession of an objectionable image. If you are sent it without, unsolicited, and you delete it, then that nobody could claim that you did anything untoward with that. It's the storage of it, and even the only reason people store it is because it's been sent to them or they found it. This is part of a file, an investigation, and we keep it. The reason I'm labouring the point is you mustn't do that. Schools shouldn't. That's part of it. Delete that image. You can say that there was an image, but you can't be in possession of it. You can talk to law enforcement who can say, forward it to me. I very much doubt that they will. Their advice will be delete it. We'll work it out some other way. But unfortunately, we've seen too many times where stuff has been stored on devices and then it causes problems for the teachers themselves. A lot of this is about not just protection of reputation or legal protection for the school, but it's protection for teachers who think they're doing the right thing, but end up with a collection of objectionable images on their laptop because they found it when they were looking through the network or whatever it is. Just carte blanche. Don't keep that stuff. Get rid of it.
Does that include text or just images?
The Objectionable Publications Act does cover objectionable content that's written. So in theory, yep.
So how does it get investigated then? If you're deleting all the evidence?
So you report it to its content, so you report it to the DIA. The DIA will investigate that based on the platforms that it came from, the individuals involved. So it's not, for a school, delete the image, but remember or write down, record who it came from, when it was sent, that kind of information. But the images themselves, just please don't be in possession of. That's the information that they require, the who, the where, the when. They will find the images should they be required as part of the investigation. It's just, please don't be part of that investigation. One of the other things we can provide is support for your parent community. We have an online safety parent toolkit, again accessible from our website. We encourage you to share this with parents at the start of the year, all the way through. It's a very simple 7-step process, 7-step guide, things that parents can do to try and familiarize themselves with the environment and be a better support for young people. We recognize how critical the support that home can provide for the safety of young people, and this is a really good guide for parents that aren't familiar or confident in that space. That's also available from our website. And a piece of advice that we share with parents that I'll leave by sharing with you is the importance of using this technology. The amount of online safety incidents that we get involved in that are created when people don't really quite understand what the technology that one party or other is using. When young people say they're using a particular platform, parents or schools assume it is one thing and actually it's something completely different. If you know that there is technology being used within your schools, either by teaching staff as part of the learning process or by young people, and you're starting to hear that it's becoming a part of the kind of social fabric, and also possibly part of the harm fabric, use these technologies, try them, take them on. If kids are within your school, young people are harming each other using TikTok, and you don't know what TikTok is, I strongly suggest you log in and use it. And I'm not for a minute suggesting that you all become a generation of TikTok users, because I'm pretty sure that would spoil TikTok for the people that really wanted to use it. But at least having an understanding of what those platforms are and what they look like is a really good first step if you're going to find yourself embroiled in a situation where someone says, I really need your help because I've got this real huge problem on TikTok. So please explore the platforms for yourself and find out what it is. And like I said halfway through, if you don't know, please ask. Netsafe is operational 7 days a week, 363 days a year now, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Please get in touch. That's what we're there for. Thanks very much.